My sister cheated with my fiance on engagement day and my family supported her. So, I'm 28 now, and not too long ago, my dad, Frank, calls me out of nowhere. We haven't spoken in like 6 years. Yeah, it's been that long. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. But when I picked up, he sounded pretty desperate. And I mean desperate, desperate. The kind of voice you use when you're in deep trouble and don't know who else to call. Now here's the thing. I wasn't ready for what he was about to drop on me. He goes on to tell me that my younger sister Lisa and her husband Brad are in some serious financial crisis. Apparently, they've dug themselves into this huge hole. And now, they're looking for someone to pull them out of it. And guess who he thinks should help? Yeah, me. The same sister who betrayed me years ago, and the same guy who was supposed to be my fiancé. Before I get into all the recent drama, let me rewind a bit so you get the full picture. This crap storm didn't just pop out of nowhere. See, Lisa's 26 now, and we've never been super close, like, we weren't at each other's throats or anything growing up, but we were just kind of distant. She was always a little sneaky, always looking for a way to get ahead, but I never thought she'd go as far as stabbing me in the back the way she did. I guess I should have seen the signs sooner, but hindsight, right? Brad, the guy I was going to marry, was everything I thought I wanted. We met in college. Typical stuff, you know? We were together for 5 years. 5 freaking years. That's a long time to be with someone. And by that point, I thought we were solid. He proposed, and I was over the moon, like I was sure I'd found my person. We planned this whole engagement party, and it was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Now here's where it all goes to hell. That night, everyone's celebrating, laughing, drinking, all that good stuff. I remember feeling like the luckiest person in the world. I mean, how often do you get a night like that where everything just feels right? Well, apparently not as often as you think. Around 10 p.m., I stepped outside to take a call, right? I needed better reception, so I wandered out to the backyard. It's dark, but the string lights were still on, and I'm walking around trying to get some signal when I see them. Lisa and Brad, together. Not just together, but, like, really together. Kissing. Like they didn't give a damn who saw. It's funny, because for a second I just stood there, frozen. My brain couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing, like, this couldn't be real, right? I mean, who does that? And on the night of your freaking engagement party, it felt like time just stopped. They didn't notice me at first, which was wild. I was standing there just a few feet away, and they were so into it, they didn't even know I was watching. When they finally saw me, their faces dropped. They stopped kissing, obviously, but it was way too late. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and bolted. I don't know how I made it to my car without completely breaking down, but I did. I sped off to the nearest hotel, checked in, and just collapsed on the bed. I couldn't even cry at first. It was like my body was too stunned to react. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that there had to be some kind of explanation, but deep down, I knew what I saw was exactly what it looked like. Lisa and Brad were screwing behind my back. I was just lying there, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. She said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I'm in love with Brad. We've been seeing each other for a while." I don't know why, but reading it somehow hurt worse than seeing it. Like, there was something about seeing those words written out that made it feel so much more final. She went on to say how she didn't mean to hurt me, but she couldn't help how she felt and blah, blah, blah. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even mad. I was just numb. Too numb to feel anything. I couldn't process it yet. Then Brad texted me. He said he was sorry too, but then he added that he had proposed to me because he thought it would make his feelings for Lisa go away. Like, what kind of twisted logic is that? He thought marrying me would somehow help him stop thinking about her. It made me feel like I was just a placeholder. Like he was just using me until he figured out how to be with Lisa. That was the moment where everything really hit me, how badly I'd been played. I stayed in that hotel for like 3 days, not talking to anyone, just trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. When I finally went back home to get my stuff, I wasn't prepared for what I walked into. I thought the house would be empty. Instead, everyone was there. My dad, my stepmom, and Lisa. Even Brad was there. It was like they were all waiting for me. Now, normally when you've just been royally screwed over, you'd expect some sort of apology, right? But no. The second I walked in, they all acted like nothing happened. Lisa came up to me with tears in her eyes and hugged me like I was supposed to feel sorry for her. Brad stood in the back looking awkward as hell, but no one said anything. No one apologized. I told them I was just there to pack my things and leave. That's when Brad spoke up, saying he was moving in with Lisa now that everything was out in the open. My dad and stepmom didn't seem fazed. In fact, they looked happy. My own family was happy that my sister had stolen my fiancé and that I was out of the picture. I asked them straight up why they were smiling. Like, what the hell was so funny? My dad, of all people, had the nerve to tell me that we can't change what happened and that it was better to just accept it and move on. Move on? Really? My sister stole my life and I'm just supposed to be okay with it? I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare where everyone around me was insane, and I was the only one seeing how messed up it was. Lisa apologized in her half-assed way, saying she couldn't help falling in love with Brad, and they were meant to be together. I was so done. I packed up my stuff, told them all to go to hell, and walked out of that house for the last time. All right, so after I packed my stuff and left my family behind, I decided to cut them all off completely. It wasn't some dramatic decision. It was more like, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I changed my number, blocked them on everything, texts, social media, all of it. I didn't want any more fake apologies or awkward messages from Lisa or Brad or, honestly, anyone else in my family. For the next few months, I felt like I could finally breathe. I wasn't waking up every day wondering if I was going to get hit with some new drama or have to deal with the fact that my own family picked my sister over me. I focused on work, built up some savings, got a new apartment, and just moved on. And honestly, life was good. No, scratch that, life was great. I didn't have to think about them. They weren't a part of my world anymore. But of course, things can't stay peaceful forever, right? So 5 years later, yep, 5 years of total silence from my family, I get this phone call. It's from a number I don't recognize, and at first I think, no way I'm answering this. But for some reason, I pick up, and guess who's on the other line? My dad, Frank. I don't even know how he got my number. Must have pulled some serious detective work to get it because I made sure they couldn't find me. I think about hanging up right there, but something in his voice makes me pause. He sounds, well, not like the strong, authoritative dad I remember. He sounds beaten down, like he's at the end of his rope. I stay on the line just to hear what he's got to say, and that's when he drops the big one on me. Turns out, Lisa and Brad, yeah, the golden couple who everyone defended back then, are in deep trouble. They're flat broke. Apparently, they started this business a few years ago trying to be entrepreneurs or whatever. You know, selling stuff online or some nonsense. Anyway, the whole thing tanked. Their investors pulled out, they're swimming in debt, and now they've sold almost everything they own. According to Dad, they're basically one step away from being homeless. Here's the kicker. Wait, I'm not supposed to say that. Dad's calling me because they need money. Yeah, you heard that right. After everything that happened, after all the betrayal and drama, they want me to bail them out. At first, I'm just sitting there, stunned. I can't believe what I'm hearing. My family hasn't talked to me in years, not since the day I walked out. And now, out of nowhere, they're asking for $75,000. $75,000? Like, where do they think I'm getting that kind of money? Do they think I've just been sitting around hoarding cash all these years? It's absolutely insane. I ask Dad straight up, why are you coming to me for this? Why don't they ask their friends or someone else in the family? And that's when he tells me that they've already tried. Apparently, everyone else is either tapped out or not willing to drain their savings to help. Even Brad's family, who always had their back, won't touch this mess. So naturally, they figured, hey, let's call the person we screwed over and ask her to save us. What's even crazier is that Lisa and Brad didn't want Dad to call me. According to him, Lisa was too embarrassed to ask me directly. They thought I'd never agree, which, spoiler alert, they were 100% right about. But Dad, being Dad, figured it was worth a shot anyway. He tried to guilt trip me, saying stuff like, they've learned their lesson, and they're family after all. I gotta admit, part of me wanted to laugh. Like, really? Now they're family? When it suits them, huh? When they need me, suddenly I'm important again. I told Dad I wasn't interested, that there was no way I was giving them that kind of money. I mean, I had to scrape and claw my way up after they all abandoned me. There was no way I was about to just hand over everything I'd worked for. Dad wasn't happy with that answer. He started getting all emotional, saying how Lisa and Brad were at rock bottom, and if I didn't help, things were going to get really bad for them. He said they'd lose their house, their business was already gone, and they were even struggling to put food on the table. But here's the thing. None of that moved me. I didn't feel sorry for them. It's like, you made your bed, now lie in it. You think you can betray someone, wreck their life, and then, years later, expect them to just swoop in and save you? Nope, not happening. I told Dad again that I wasn't helping, and that's when he lost it. He starts calling me selfish, saying I've become cruel and bitter, and that I'm letting my grudge tear the family apart. It was wild. Like, I'm the one tearing the family apart, after everything they did. I told him straight up that I wasn't going to be guilted into anything. I wasn't going to feel bad for protecting myself after the way they all treated me. I reminded him how everyone had taken Lisa's side, how they all stood by while she destroyed my engagement and stole my future. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, but he didn't say anything. The call ended with him just kind of muttering, "I hope you don't regret this," and then hanging up. It felt like such a weak threat, like he was still trying to make me feel like I was in the wrong. But here's the thing. After I hung up, I didn't feel any guilt. I felt relief, like this was the final nail in the coffin. I knew for sure that I didn't need these people in my life anymore. And if they were struggling now, that was on them. Over the next few days, I started getting these guilt-ridden text messages from Dad. I'm talking nonstop. He was blowing up my phone with messages like, "You're still my daughter. I know you'll do the right thing." And, "Lisa made mistakes, but we all have." It was like he was trying every angle to get me to cave. I even got a few from my stepmom, Julie, telling me how heartbroken she was and how she couldn't believe I was acting like this. I didn't respond to any of them. I just blocked their numbers. I had already made my decision, and no amount of guilt or manipulation was going to change that. They made their choices, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Honestly, cutting them off again was probably the best thing I could have done. It gave me peace, knowing I wasn't going to be dragged into their mess anymore. Let them figure it out. They made their bed. Now they can deal with it. A few days after I blocked my dad and stepmom, things finally felt like they were settling down again. I'd managed to push the whole ridiculous situation to the back of my mind. You know, I was focusing on work, hanging out with friends, getting back to my normal routine. I wasn't about to let their drama mess up my life again. But of course, just when you think things are quiet, that's when the chaos sneaks up on you. It was a Saturday, and I remember it so clearly because I'd just gotten back from grocery shopping and was looking forward to a chill afternoon. I had some music playing, was about to make lunch, and then my phone started buzzing. At first I thought it might be one of those spam calls, so I ignored it. But then it buzzed again. This time it was a text from my neighbor. Now my neighbor Sarah is a sweet lady in her 60s, who's lived next to me for years. We're not super close, but she's the kind of person who will bring you cookies around the holidays and tell you when your package gets left on her porch by mistake. So when I see her name pop up, I figured it must be something small. Maybe she needed help moving a plant or something. But her message was weird. It just said, "Are you home? There's a couple outside your house. They've been knocking and yelling for a while. I'm not sure if you know them, but it's starting to make me nervous." My stomach dropped immediately. I had a pretty good idea of who it was before I even looked out the window. Sure enough, when I peeked out, there they were. Lisa and Brad, standing on my front porch looking all kinds of pissed off. Lisa was pacing back and forth, and Brad was leaning against the door like he had nowhere better to be. I had this moment where I just froze. Part of me wanted to march out there and tell them to leave, but another part of me was like, hell no, I'm not getting involved with this. My first instinct was to call the police. I mean, they were on my property, causing a scene. But before I could even dial, Brad noticed me looking through the window. Great. Now that they knew I was home, I couldn't pretend I wasn't. Lisa started banging on the door harder, yelling, "We just want to talk!" Brad didn't say anything, but he was staring at me like I owed him something. The audacity of it made me sick to my stomach. I opened the door just a crack, enough to talk but not enough for them to push their way in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing how pissed I was. Lisa jumped in first, saying how I'd been ignoring everyone, and they needed to talk to me. She was practically shouting at this point, all worked up like she was the one who had been wronged. "You blocked us on everything. You didn't even let us explain," she said, her face red and frustrated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Explain? Explain what exactly? How they'd both betrayed me, and then expected me to just hand over money when they messed up their own lives? "I don't need to hear your explanations," I said, keeping the door between us like a barrier. "I already know everything I need to know." Brad, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly chimed in. "We're family, all right? You can't just cut us out and act like we don't exist. We didn't come here to fight. We just need your help." I could feel my blood boiling. The nerve of this guy. He was the reason my life got flipped upside down in the first place, and now he was standing on my porch, talking about how I couldn't cut them off? What kind of reality were these people living in? "I can cut you off, and I did," I snapped. "Whatever you're here for, I'm not interested." But Lisa wouldn't let it go. She stepped forward like she was going to push her way in, and I instinctively pushed the door a little more closed. "It's not about what you want," she said, voice all high-pitched and desperate. We need your help. You don't get it. We're in serious trouble. If you don't help us, we could lose everything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. She looked worn out, like someone who hadn't slept in days. But then I remembered why they were here, why I was even in this position, and any sympathy I felt vanished. That's not my problem, I said firmly. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I don't owe you anything. Lisa's face twisted into this mix of anger and disbelief. She looked like she was about to cry, but it wasn't the kind of tears you feel bad for. It was more like frustration tears, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving her what she wanted. Brad, on the other hand, wasn't crying. No, he was mad. He stepped forward, and I could see his fists clenching. You don't get it, do you? He said, his voice low and almost threatening. We're not leaving until you agree to help us. At that point, I was done. I didn't care what they needed or why they were here. They were on my property, trying to intimidate me into giving them money. It wasn't just desperate, it was insane. Get off my porch, I said, my voice shaking a little, but I was trying to stay strong. You're not getting a penny from me. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops. That seemed to get their attention. Lisa's eyes widened, and Brad took a step back, like he was actually considering what I'd said. But then Lisa started again, her voice rising in desperation. You wouldn't call the police on your own family. We're family. You can't do this. I'd heard enough. Without another word, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was racing, and I could feel my hands shaking, but I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I could still hear Lisa yelling outside, but I ignored it. The police showed up about 15 minutes later, and by then, Lisa and Brad were sitting on the steps of my porch like they were waiting for me to change my mind. When the officers arrived, I opened the door just enough to explain what was happening. They asked Lisa and Brad to leave, but Lisa tried to play the victim, saying how I was abandoning my family and refusing to help in a time of need. The officers weren't buying it. They told them both to leave, and finally, after what felt like hours, they did. But not before Lisa threw one last look over her shoulder, like she was still hoping I'd change my mind. Spoiler, I didn't. A couple days passed after Brad and Lisa showed up at my house, and I thought that was the end of it. I mean, I kicked them out, right? There's no way they'd come back after that. But I should have known better. They weren't the type to just give up. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was getting ready to head out when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but something told me to. I glanced down and saw it was a message from my dad. And this message, it was different. It wasn't like the others, where he was begging me to help or guilting me about family. This one was short, just 3 words. We need to talk. My gut reaction was to ignore it, but something about the way he phrased it, so blunt and to the point, made me uneasy. I decided to call him back just to see what he had to say. If it was more guilt trips, I'd hang up immediately. He picked up on the first ring. I'm glad you called, he said, his voice low, almost serious. I didn't like it. We've made a decision. That threw me off. What do you mean? Dad sighed, and there was this long pause before he spoke again. Lisa and Brad, they're out of options. They've lost everything. Julie and I can't help them anymore, and if you don't step in, they're going to have nothing. I was quiet, waiting for the catch, because there was always a catch. He continued, Julie and I have been talking, and we don't want to pressure you, but we need to know if you're going to help them or not. Because if you're not, we're going to have to cut ties with you. I blinked, not sure I heard him right. Wait, what? You heard me, he said. We can't keep this up anymore. If you're not going to help, then we have no choice but to stop talking to you. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. Was he seriously giving me an ultimatum? Help the people who betrayed me, or lose my family for good? It was insane. I couldn't believe it. You've got to be kidding, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You're seriously choosing them over me? Again? It's not like that, Dad tried to explain. It's just, they need help. And we can't keep watching them fall apart. We have to stand by them. And screw me, right? Just like before? I snapped. You expect me to bail them out after everything they've done? And now you're threatening to cut me off if I don't? There was another long pause, and for a moment I thought he might backtrack. But then he said quietly, I'm sorry, but yes. That was it. The final straw. I hung up without another word. I couldn't believe what had just happened, but one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down. They could cut me off if they saw they wanted to, But I wasn't going to be blackmailed into helping the people who destroyed my life. And as far as I was concerned, I had just lost my family all over again. So, after that last phone call with my dad, I figured I'd hit rock bottom with this whole situation. I mean, how much worse could it get, right? My own father gave me an ultimatum: help my sister and Brad, or be cut off from the family for good. And honestly, I was pretty sure I'd made my peace with it. If that's how they wanted to play things, fine. I wasn't going to beg them to stay in my life. I had done that once, years ago, and I wasn't about to do it again. But of course, I should have known it wasn't over. A few days after that conversation, I was at home, trying to just focus on work, forget about the drama, and move on. It had been quiet for a little bit, which I thought was a good sign. No frantic texts, no surprise visits, just me, getting back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was coming. And sure enough, it did. It was around 7 p.m. on a Saturday when the doorbell rang. My heart sank immediately because, well, who else would it be? I wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody just shows up at my place unannounced, not unless they're looking for trouble. I walked to the door, already feeling that mix of dread and annoyance building up inside me. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. There they were. Dad, Julie, Lisa, and Brad. All four of them standing there like they were about to stage some kind of intervention. Lisa looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was all smudged. Brad was doing his usual pacing thing, looking pissed off and stressed out. Dad and Julie stood a little back, like they were waiting for me to invite them in. I didn't. Instead, I just stood in the doorway, crossing my arms, trying to stay calm. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "We need to talk," Dad said, his tone serious, almost like this was some official business meeting or something. I sighed. "We've already talked. You gave me your ultimatum. I'm not helping them, and I'm not changing my mind." Dad looked at Lisa, who stepped forward, her eyes red and puffy. "Please, just hear us out," she said, her voice cracking. "I know we messed up. I know we hurt you, but this is serious. We're about to lose everything." There it was again. The guilt, the pressure, the same crap they'd been throwing at me for weeks now. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. "And that's my problem." "How?" I asked, not moving an inch from the door. "You made your choices. You both did. Now you have to live with them." Lisa started crying again, but I wasn't feeling sorry for her. I couldn't. Not after everything. Brad finally stopped pacing long enough to jump in. "Look, I know you think we're just trying to use you," he said, his voice a little calmer now. "But this isn't about that. We're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to." "Yeah, and whose fault is that?" I shot back. "You burned every bridge you had." That seemed to hit a nerve because Brad's face twisted into this angry scowl. But before he could blow up, my dad stepped forward, holding up his hands like he was trying to calm everyone down. "Enough," Dad said, his voice firm. "Let's not get into another argument. We came here to make peace." I actually laughed at that. Make peace, really? After they tried to blackmail me into giving them money? After they basically disowned me? "You want peace?" I said, shaking my head. "Then you should have thought about that before you all turned your backs on me." Julie, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. "We made a mistake," she said, her voice soft. "But this is family, and family helps each other when things go wrong." "No," I said, my voice cold now. "Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't pick sides and leave one person behind just because it's convenient. You all chose Lisa and Brad. You made that decision years ago, and now you're dealing with the consequences. So don't come to me talking about family." There was a long pause. I could tell they weren't expecting me to stand my ground like this. I think they thought if they all showed up together, looking pitiful, I'd cave. But that wasn't going to happen. "I'm not giving you money," I said, my voice steady. "Not now, not ever." Dad's face tightened. "So that's it? You're really going to turn your back on us? Turn my back on you?" I couldn't believe he actually said that. "You turned your back on me, and now you want me to pretend like that never happened because you're in trouble? That's not how this works. I'm done. I've been done for years." Lisa stepped forward again, her voice desperate. "Please, I'm begging you. We're going to lose our house. We don't have anywhere else to go." I looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't care." And I didn't. I really didn't. That part of me, the part that used to care about what they thought about making things right, was gone. It had died the night I saw Lisa and Brad together in that backyard. And nothing they said or did now was going to change that. Brad's anger finally boiled over. He stepped up, practically in my face. "You're really just going to stand there and let us lose everything? You think you're better than us because you have money now?" I didn't even flinch. "No," I said calmly. I think I'm smarter than you because I didn't throw my life away chasing something that was never mine to begin with. He looked like he was about to blow a gasket, but Dad stepped in between us, pushing him back. That's enough, Dad said, his voice low and threatening. We're leaving. Yeah, I said, holding the door open wider. You are. They all stared at me for a moment, like they were waiting for me to change my mind. Like maybe, at the last second, I'd say, okay, fine, I'll help. But I didn't. I stood my ground, and after what felt like an eternity, they turned and walked away. As they left, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like a weight had finally been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. They could cut me off if they wanted to. They could play the victim and act like I was the bad guy. But I didn't care anymore. I had my life, and they had theirs, and that was all that mattered. When I closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't looking back.